to the latest installment of the Expert Webinar Series from AccountantsWorld. My name is Div Bansali. I'm a Vice President of Marketing at AccountantsWorld. Joining us today will be Brian Tankersly, CPA.CITP. He'll be talking about fraud in the cloud, new concerns for a new frontier. Before I turn this over to Brian, just a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking an hour to spend some time with us and learn about this important topic. I want to remind you that the webinar audio can be broadcast over your computer speakers or via telephone. If you'd like to switch your preference, you can go to the GoToWebinar audio panel. So you'll see the control panel, and then you go under audio, and you can find options to select your preference there. We recommend that you close any other browsers that might have any audio associated with them so that you don't have audio streaming conflict. Also, if you haven't yet gotten a copy of today's webinar, the page here actually says to download the class materials. Much easier thing to do is just go to the control panel, look under the Handouts tab, and you'll see Fraud in the Cloud 2015.pdf, and you can go ahead and download today's presentation right there and follow along with Brian on the presentation. We are offering 1 CP credit for attendance today, and what we're looking for is active webinar participation. What that means is you need to attend the live webinar for no less than 50 minutes, respond to all polling questions during the webinar. Brian will be executing the polls, and then also there'll be a brief post-webinar survey right after the webinar ends. We'll also send a link to it via a follow-up email. Make sure you submit that post-webinar survey within the next 24 hours after the webinar ends. If you submit it right after the webinar ends, you don't need to click on the link within the email to resubmit it. Just one submission is fine. A couple of tips on how to use the GoToWebinar control panel in case you haven't used it before. You'll see the control panel. You can use the orange arrow to expand or hide the panel. Right underneath that, you'll see the audio options. You can expand that to choose telephone or computer speakers. If you have access to both, we recommend computer audio. It's more direct and it'll come in more crisp. If you have any questions during the webinar, simply expand the questions tab, type in your question, and click send, and one of us will try to respond during or just after the webinar. And then finally, as I mentioned, you can also go to the Handouts tab, find today's slide deck, and follow along with Brian's presentation. Today is the 6th presentation in the Expert Webinar Series this year. The next one up is myself. I will be speaking in 4 weeks, October 7th at 3 p.m. And the topic there will be about quick marketing tips that you can use to make an impact on your practice. So I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to please go ahead and sign up for that. That'll be followed by Jeff Gramlich, who will be presenting on November 4th about payroll services. And then finally, Rick Telberg presenting on December 2nd about getting ready for the upcoming tax season. So I encourage you to please sign up for all of these. All of the sessions are free and are eligible for CPE as well. So before I turn it over to Brian Tankersly, a quick bio of our speaker today. Brian is the Director of Strategic Relationships at K2 Enterprises. Brian is a frequent speaker at continuing education courses on technology for many state CPA societies, and overall has delivered presentations now in 46 U.S. states, I believe Canada as well. Brian is a 4-time recipient of the Top 25 Thought Leaders in Public Accounting Technology from CPA Practice Advisor, and Brian's committed to empowering CPAs and businesses for the digital age. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn over the floor to our speaker today, Brian Tankersly.
Thank you, Deb. I appreciate it, and thanks for the kind introduction. Very glad to be with you guys today. You know, every day I'm not in the cubicle doing Yellow Book is a win for me. Okay, so again, this session, what we're going to do is we're going to go through, and we've got a lot of material. We're going to go through and look at some of the things going on related to fraud online, how things have changed. We'll go through and look at some cloud-based frauds that have occurred, including Cryptolocker, which some of you may have run into, unfortunately. We'll talk about data breaches. We'll look at some of the legal issues associated with it. Probably just gloss over the legal issues, honestly, because we're a little bit short on time. And then we'll go through, and we've got some information in here on mitigating and managing risks. So we'll get you quite a bit of stuff in here. Now, you'll notice your handouts have 42 pages in them, and we have, at this point, 55 minutes plus 4 polling questions to get done, okay? It's probably more likely that the Earth will crash into the sun than we'll get through all these slides. But I wanted to put the whole slide deck in front of you anyway, so that way you can look up some of the stuff, you know, and again, so we can kind of talk to the slides instead of me reading them to you, because my experience is that people, you know, when we have folks that go in and just read off the slides, people tend to want to harm themselves or others before the end of the presentation, okay? So anyway, this is me. This is what I look like, okay? One of the other things that Div didn't mention that I do is I'm the principal author of the Accounting Firm Operations and Tech Survey. This is a 200-page survey that comes out in the end of the first quarter, first to second quarter every year. But what may be interesting to many of you is for those of you that are in public accounting, for this survey, if you will take the survey and do the 86 questions, we'll send you a copy of it for free. Now, we sell it right now for $350 from CPA Trendlines. But if you'll take the survey for free, starting in about a month, and again, the link is on there. You also have the ability to opt in off of the poll here today. But if you'll take the survey, then we'll be pleased to send you a digital copy of it. So that's the story. Again, the links are on the screen, and again, some of those may not be in your notes, but you've got that. If you're roving, looking for CP later this year, these are some of the conferences I'm speaking at later this year. If I'm there, just say hi. I'd love to say hi to you and, you know, chat with you for a little bit. So for a description, the cloud's out here. In fact, there's an article in Journal of Accountancy this month talking about security in the cloud. You know, and security, to be sure, is a concern with the cloud. However, when it comes to accounting software in particular, I would rebut that article by saying that I think security is an important consideration, and it's a condition precedent before you put stuff into the cloud. That having been said, though, I think the bigger problem we've got right now with a lot of the cloud products is that, you know, unlike AccountantsWorld, which has got a great feature set, not all the cloud products have a full feature set. So I want you to go in and think about this. You know, a lot of people say, why do you need to go to the cloud? Well, you know, you need to go to the cloud because there's something in it for you, as opposed to just because everybody else says you should. You know, if you don't understand why you're doing it, it may not be the right move for you. So that having been said, you can't exactly hide your head under the sand either. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to have. We'll also mention that so there's some things you might need for forensics that are going to be different, because the evidence you get from a cloud investigation is very different from the evidence you get from a on-premises investigation. So again, this is our overview of 4 basic sections. First section, selected cloud-based frauds. And we've got quite a few things that have happened over the last couple of years. I want to talk about some of these things because our profession has been just stupidly lucky over the last couple of years, in that if you look at where the major breaches are, one of the things that's happening is that when we get these large breaches, what's happening here is they're targeting banks and insurance companies and healthcare organizations and government agencies and all kinds of other things like this. But you know what? They're not going out here and targeting accounting firms. As we saw in an Accounting Today article earlier this year, I think I've got that in here, that's starting to change. So you need to be aware that our profession has been stupidly lucky, but like all good luck streaks, it will come to an end. And so you need to be more diligent now than ever when it comes to keeping your data secure. So we'll talk about some of the ways things are happening. One of the first ones I want to mention to you is going to be a phishing attack. And if you're not familiar with a phishing attack, this is where somebody sends you an email, and the email may have a subject like log into your bank now, late fee, or ADP payroll, or something else like that. And if that, or it may look something like this, where it says your Outlook session is expired, please log in to continue. And so something as simple as making this look like a place where you could put in your username and password, and then you putting that data in may actually transmit that to somebody remotely. So this is what we're going to talk about next, is a thing called an email. Some people use this thing called a phishing attack, again, where they're trying to get you to enter your confidential data so that they can retrieve it, and then they can use your credentials to log in. Now, this occurred with a company, with a group in here called Fin4, and so there's some security consultants from a company called FireEye found that this hacker group called Fin4 was sending messages out to recipients, and they were specifically targeting people that were CEO, COO, CFO types, or people that were in the merger and acquisition function inside the organization. They actually went through and according to these consultants, they penetrated 80 public companies and 20 banks. So the idea here was to gain access to Outlook web access and to their email so that they could go in and they were able to then read all their email traffic going back and forth about things to get insider trading information. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I want to just go over this email for a second, because this email is instructive of some of the things that you can expect in a phishing attack. Notice that first off, they put a luring title that would lure you, like somebody's making negative comments about you. Anytime you see some kind of email like this from somebody you've never heard of, your hair should stand on end. If you've never heard of somebody and they're talking about things about you, that's a strategy that a lot of these phishing attacks will use, simply so that you'll get nervous, and then you'll get some adrenaline, and then suddenly you're not thinking like yourself. So in here it says user in an investment discussion forum posted negative comments about the company, and you in specific overpaid and incompetent. Now if that doesn't get you mad, I'm sorry. You know, something's wrong. Gave details of disagreements, may have unwittingly divulged confidential information. You see what they're doing? They're trying to make this link at the bottom that they've put in here. They're trying to make this link irresistible to you so that you'll click on that link in the email and then log in, or otherwise create a login so that they're able to get access to so then they'll get data from you, like a username and a password and things like that. I mention this to you because many of you have received emails like this. I know I've received phishing emails like this from Barclays Bank, who I've never done business with, Chase Manhattan, a lot of other banks that I don't personally use, saying that I need to log into my account. The thing that I would say to all of you here is that anytime you get an email message like this, you should never, ever click on that email in the link. In fact, I'll go a little bit further and say that I think you should only click on links in email when you're resetting a password on a consumer site, and you have to click on the link in the email message to reset your password, and you personally, in the last 5 minutes, have requested that password to be reset. Any other time, you shouldn't click on links. Links in email are a trap that you'll fall into. So I show this to you because this is an example of a phishing message. This is how the bad guys are getting access to a lot of this sensitive data, is again by sending out email messages like this that look like they're from somebody trying to do well for you, but instead are from people trying to gather your information so they can do things. As part of this, again, the hackers targeted people with access to this highly confidential data. They traded on it and then ended up making money off of the trades. So, you know, again, here's a timeline of it. You can see down at the bottom that there's a URL at the bottom of the page, bit.ly/Fin4phishing. And if you want to read more about that, you can just go to that site and read this on Ars Technica. But this is a well-documented event that's happened in here. So the thing to take away from all of this is that if you have sensitive information, you should be on guard, because even though you think, oh, well, all I'm doing is working on this acquisition, and you know it's a company in a sleepy industry, and there's no way anybody be interested in this. But don't forget that if there are public companies involved, there are all kinds of issues with the SEC that can arise related to this, and all kinds of liabilities that can be created by inadvertent disclosure of this kind of sensitive data. So just be aware of this, be careful with it. let's go ahead and do our first polling question. And that first polling question, if I can find it over here, how would you describe your primary job? So we'd like to know if you're in public accounting or bookkeeping, or in industry, if you're nonprofit governmental agency or education, or something else. So if y'all will go ahead and answer this here. Let's see. Question here. I received an email this morning telling me my accounting firm has been selected to a top 10 firm in my area. There's a link to review my award. Deleted without further action. Good job, Peter. Yeah, that's the right thing. That's the right kind of thing to do. Now, if there's a link in there from, let's say, Who's Who, what you might do is go to whatever their address is in your web browser. You know, if it was a known good website, and then go through there. I also got a comment here. Intuit Pro advisors have certainly been targets lately. That's right. You know, the holy grail of a lot of this data is going to be that tax data. So anyway, that's what we have. Another question, can simply opening or previewing an email cause damage? Absolutely. And so just by opening or previewing an email, it can cause damage depending on what the kind of stuff they put in there. So, you know, again, what I would say is that if you get an email and it's not from anybody you recognize, and the topic is somewhat suspicious, you know, if you're not sure, I don't know that it would kill you to delete it. But, you know, again, I'm probably erring on the side of being too cautious, but in many ways, I'd rather be a little bit too cautious than not cautious enough. So it looks like just about everybody's voted. Got one or two more people, a few more people to vote. If you haven't voted in the poll, please do so. Remember, you need to vote in 3 of the 4 polling questions to get credit. So I'll give you about another 5 seconds to pick something, and then we'll call it done. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and gone. All right, thank you all for voting. Now I'll just show you that 58% of you are in public accounting, 20% industry, 14% nonprofit, government agency or education, and 8% other. So that gives us some information here. Question, if you click from an iPhone, is that also dangerous? It is, oh, hi Fred, by the way. It is potentially dangerous, but it's, but the issue here is that you run into with it is that you've got a pretty good architecture behind the iPhone. So it's possible something could happen, but assuming you haven't jailbroken the iPhone, it's going to be less risky, I would say, to do it on a phone than it might be, you know, an unjailbroken iPhone, than it might be to even do it on PC. Okay. And Gary, I'll talk to you offline about the other stuff. Okay, so our next item here, Russian hackers amassed more than 1 billion email accounts. I mentioned this to you because this is another way that the bad guys will target you. If you use the same username and same password on every website. So if I used BFT CPA on a lot of websites like I do, and then I used password as my password, unlike how I do, and then what the bad guys could actually do is get you to go in and fill in some of the, and they'll try to gather these stolen credentials from other websites where the other website has weak username and password controls. And so these sites with weak security, the problem we run into, and this is why, by the way, you can't use the same password on every website, is because when we have one of these weak websites, if you use the same username and password on every website, then when one of them becomes compromised, then all your accounts are compromised. So just want you to be aware that this is something happened here. They actually penetrated some sites. They're expecting to use these things to send a lot of junk mail. We also see a lot of spam where this is targeted. And once the accounts are under hacker control, they transfer money, do other things like this. So, the rule, the thing, I'll give you some tips a little bit later on this, but there's some interesting things you can do to kind of protect yourself. But one of the key things I think you need to do is to use some kind of password management software and have different usernames and passwords for websites. So, for example, I'm BFT CPA on a lot of public websites, but on my bank, I'm not BFT CPA. I'm nothing like BFT CPA. I have a username that's so weird you'd never recognize it in a million years or associate it with me. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Now, other attacks that have happened, RSA, which was an encryption organization, they provide these two-factor authentication tokens, like you see down in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. These are, again, where these provide an additional layer of security in that you have a username and a password you have to use to log in. Like my wife has a token just like this she uses from the bank. And so she logs in with her username and password, and then she goes in and she has to put in also this 6-digit code that's on this RSA Secure ID. And the code's only good for about 2 minutes. And then once if somebody steals her username and password, they have no hope of getting logged in if they don't have this number. Well, the organization that actually put these tokens out got hacked in 2011, and as a result of that, it compromised these two-factor authentication tokens. So what I want you to understand, when we're looking at security in general, you can't rely on a single thing to block all the other stuff going on. What instead you're going to have to do is you're going to have to instead rely on having multiple layers of security. So these tokens improve security significantly in that if somebody hops the fence that is username and password, something you know, they then have to hop another fence that's something you have in this token. And so as long as the token information remains secure, then this becomes a pretty good second layer of defense. So we'll talk a little more about this. This is actually called two-factor authentication, but I mentioned this to you because a lot of people hung their hats on having this two-factor authentication token as kind of a silver bullet. And I show this to you because there is no silver bullet. You don't think you're vulnerable? Well, this is where we had a spear phishing attack at the Oak Ridge National Lab in Tennessee. This was actually in the New York, actually this is in the Wired Threat Level blog. It was also in the New York Times. Oak Ridge National Lab, they do national security and nuclear weapons research. They also have a national supercomputer center. I actually know people that work there. And a lot of these slides come from a presentation done by the ORNL director that he gave about 4 years ago to the Friends of Oak Ridge National Lab. So looking at this now, they actually used a spear phishing attack, just like the one I showed you earlier, or similar to it. I'll show you an example of the email. They gained system administrator access, and they shut their systems down for a while they responded to the crisis. So you can see the bad guys sent out 573 phishing emails, 50 people clicked on them, 2 systems got infected, and then one system, it just takes one, with administrative privileges was compromised, and as a result of that, their domain controller and Active Directory, all the permissions that control access to the entire digital world of ORNL became compromised. And then they saw increased activity, they had web services shut down, and they went from there. Now, what did the email look like? Well, this is the actual email from his presentation. And I show this to you because this is another example of a phishing email. And you need to see this because this is the kind of stuff that you should probably go over with your staff people from time to time, just to talk to them about what to do and what not to do from a security perspective. You know, you have training on sexual harassment, and you have training and updates on your health insurance plan. You should have a training and updates on security as well, just so everybody's singing off the same sheet of music. It's not enough for you to know what needs to be done. You and your staff all need to know what needs to be done so that you're less likely to click on things. But if we look at this, you can see that the email up at the top, this is not from an ORNL email address. So if you don't know the sender, you weren't expecting an email, if you're not sure, delete the email. We also have the general salutation here. Dear all. Oh, what a cute kid. Let's name him or her all. Right? Doesn't make any sense. We have a link in the message that they want you to click on, and it contains a PowerPoint file. Any kind of Microsoft Office file or Adobe Acrobat file can be a vector for a virus or other kind of infection by virtue of putting code inside those files. So if you open up a PowerPoint file or another item, our rule is within K2 is that we don't share those items. We don't send emails to people inside of K2 unless, or we send emails, excuse me. But if we're not sure that the email came from somebody, then I wouldn't do it. Okay. So anyway, that's what we got. No, the last thing here is it doesn't say anything about ORNL. Notice up at the top that this information is coming from mgl.com, Mike's Golf Lima. And the reason that's important for you to see is because this mgl.com has nothing to do with ornl.gov. So if you're looking at this, you have this in here. There's one more thing you're missing. Look down here. What are we missing down here at the bottom? Notice there's not a landline phone number. So I mention this to you because in many of these cases, you'll have a phone number that people will ask, that people will put on their messages, and by putting that phone number on there, you can pick up the phone and call them if you're not sure that something's legitimate. Okay, so I show these two. I've been through two messages with you now. I wanted you to see these because this is kind of the pattern they fall. They'll either try to get you really upset or they'll try to lure you in and fool you and make you think things are what they're not. So if we look at mgl.com, you know, it looks kind of close to ornl.gov, close enough anyway. And so what I'd like you to see, what I'd like you to understand about all of this is that when we're working through this, you know, ORNL before this happened was named a National Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity. So I mention this to you because if they can get infected, I assure you that any of you can get infected. Okay. Now, they had a response. They were offline for a little while. They're working on their cyber defenses and working through here to try to do things. These are some of the key things that you may want to do to try to get things to protect yourself. You know, again, firewalls, user awareness, least user privileges, that is, even for your system administrators. If you don't need to run something as a system administrator, you shouldn't do it. Monitoring the activity in a network, looking at the logs of what's happening, and then segmenting off your organization. So that way, if somebody does breach the organization, they don't get into the whole thing. They just get into a small subset. All right, our next item then is many of you are spending more and more money on online advertising. I know when I talk to and consult with accounting software vendors, one of the things that I see from and hear from a lot of them is that they're going in and they're spending a lot more money on Google AdWords, click-through AdSense advertising. And so what we're seeing now is there's now malware out there that takes advantage of it and then goes in and it allows people to waste their daily ad budget. Okay, so those are some of the items in here. You know, target breach, many of you have seen this. Some of you probably were subject to it, but that certainly occurred. Here's the Home Depot breach that occurred as well, and so they had similar problems in here. Now, why does this matter? Well, when we think about these security breaches that have occurred, the question always comes up when I talk to people is, well, it's great that they got my credit card number, but how can they actually do something with it? And I want to go through this because it's actually kind of interesting to see how how things actually get monetized in this world. So if we think about this now, we've actually gone through almost a specialization that's occurred here. Just like, you know, we don't have, you know, we have different trades in many manufacturing sites. So, you know, you think about it, you have the sand hogs that do the excavation and the underground digging. You have the iron workers. You have the building. You know, have the sheetrock people. You have all kinds of different professions in here. The same thing has occurred when we come to stolen credit cards, in that the bad guys have started specializing. So they'll have one set of groups that will steal the data and do this. In fact, there's another group that will go out and go a step further and create the tools that the bad guys use to retrieve data and to try to harvest the data. Then these data thieves will take the cards, bundle them by bank and geography. And why are they doing this? Well, they're doing this because they know that it'll be, but based on the bank ID and the geography, it'll make it easier for the people that they're selling it to use these, so they get more money on them, more higher return on them here. You can see that we'll have guaranteed validity percentage on it, as well as they talk about the age of the data. And then we need the geography so that, again, we can make sure that we're getting it shipped or buying it from wherever, something near the victim's homes. They then buy things online from sites that don't check addresses, or sites that sites that don't require you to put in that CVV code that's printed on the front of an Amex card or the back of a Visa, and then off we go from there. Then the remailers receive the goods and forward them on. Now, what does it look like? Well, the card data sold in these carding shops on the dark web, like McDumples. By the way, this is from a Krebs on Security article, and the link to it is at the bottom of the page. Then what these people will do is they'll end up with these cards, like this prepaid Visa card, it's new account here, whatever. They then go to the big box retailers, and then after that, they'll have this shipped to a house that's for sale, let's say, and then they'll hire somebody through a remailer service like Label City to then take this and ship it to somebody that they sold it to on eBay. So there's a specialization in the people that are writing the software that takes to steal the data, the people actually stealing the data, then people buy the credit card and other ill-gotten gains. Then those people are another specialization, and then they will hire people that will go out and do the shopping, and they'll effectively serve as mules to reship the information, reship the goods, and then the people that, and what will happen is before the goods arrive at the location, they'll actually sell the goods on eBay, and they'll have these reshipping mules send the ill-gotten goods that are sent to somebody's house on to the next person. So that's how they launder it and turn it into money. So I show this to you because this is what's happening in the background. Now, as we look at this, as you'd expect over time, as a set of cards gets older, they'll actually have lower and lower ability to use, because what happens is after a few days, people will figure out that, oh, Mike, there's weird activity going on my card, so I'm going to cancel it and get a new card now. So if we look at the dates on the target card batches, notice that the announcement occurred right around in here, so right around the 15th or so of December 2013. Notice that as we went through time, the guaranteed reliability on the cards went down significantly. So I show this to you because these are actual names of bundles of cards that were bundled by the data thieves. And so there's a lot of stuff going on here with it. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but this gives you some details on how all the stuff works. And again, the thing about this is that as the cards become older, they become less valuable. There are certain kinds of cards that are worth more and less. For example, a breach card that was based somewhere outside the U.S., so it could be used in international commerce, then it might be worth more than, let's say, my check card that I actually used at Target before the breach. And so what happened with my check card is that, when I'm outside the country or try to buy anything outside the country, my check card automatically declines it. And so that's why there's a premium for those non-U.S. cards. Okay, so just be aware that's out here. This is another screen capture of one of these reshipping places that you have, so just want you to be aware that those are some of the things out here. Let's go ahead and do our next polling question. And so that one is going to be, have you had a malware problem at your home or office in the last year? It's just to let me know what's going on here with it. Just want you to think about it, because I think there's going to be a surprisingly high percentage of you that have had a problem either at your home or at your office or both in the last year. Because our next topic is something called Cryptolocker. This is what's called ransomware. I consider this a type of malware, but what Cryptolocker does is, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but this is one of the more prevalent malwares that's out there. I've heard of numerous CPA firms, medical firms, law firms that have been infected by this. There are a lot of situations where this is occurring, and so I want to show this to you because this is one of the things that, if you're not subject to where somebody goes in and they try to lure you to a website and get you to put in your username and password, one of the other more common things that you'll see is this destructive malware out here that, like you'll see, that will actually encrypt your data. So it looks like just about all of you put in your answers. Let's go ahead and give it about another 5 seconds or so, and then I'm going to call it done. You know, if you're not sure, just pick something. Nobody's going to die. All right, so it's like 94%, 95%. Okay, I'm going to call that done then. So I'll close this poll out, and so I'll share it with you. And this is the kind of stat I want you to see, is that almost half of you have had a malware problem either at your home or your office in the last year, and 10% of you have had problems at both. And so that's another reason why you don't click on links in email messages, and you don't open up email messages or attachments from people that you don't know. Because when we start looking at this, these issues are all directly related to people clicking on and going places out and go. Okay, there are also some other places you can pick up these infections, and some of them have nothing to do with doing anything untoward. But I just mention it to you because I want you to know that the malware is getting better, and the really good IT guys are using a number of different tools in here. Now, I've got a question from, what are some examples of some good monitoring tools? DC, I can get you a better answer for that offline. I don't want to get into that in detail. DC, if you will send me an email, brian@k2e.com, I'll be pleased to put you in touch with some, or get you some information on some of those tools. Okay, so with this now, here's another comment. Even if I know that an email is from my bank, I would not click on a link from within. I completely agree. You know, you never click on links from somebody else in an email. What you instead do is navigate to the site that you know to be good, and then you work off of that site so that you have it. So. FBI's put out some warnings about Sony Pictures Entertainment. I show this to you because North Korea is rumored to have been behind the hack at Sony Entertainment, which, by the way, resulted in significant executive changes at that company. And so it wasn't just the CTO or CIO that lost their job, but the CEO lost their job as well. And the company now is, you know, there's been a lot of rumors about it. I haven't read that much lately, but I want you to know that the malware out there is really good. Now, notice that since this has been linked to the North Korean government, we're talking about a third world government here, one of the poorest countries in the world that just happens to have nuclear weapons. But you know, again, the resources of a company like Sony Pictures are nothing compared to a nation state. Okay, so let's talk about Cryptolocker. This is an example of the window that comes up. What happens in Cryptolocker is you click on some kind of link. Sometimes it's related to a previously unknown security vulnerability you may have had on your computer from Adobe Flash or Java or your web browser. Or you may have inadvertently run and executed some kind of application through it. So you can see that. Encryptions, they basically will take this. Now, you know, in encryption, you have a public key and a private key. And the public key is just enough to scramble the data. But then the private key is what you have to decrypt the data. So think of it as Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, and then I had to have a private key to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so what's happening now is these things will go out and search every mapped internet drive, every map drive on your computer. So drive C, where you have all your stuff, drive N, that's your network, any drive that's mapped on your computer with a letter associated with it. It'll then go through and look for any kind of Office file, any kind of database file, a lot of different file extensions. Once it's finished decrypting, which in many cases takes as much as 12 hours, it will encrypt all of those files. They'll be unusable to you. They'll be like they're just gibberish. And then they'll hold them ransom for 72 hours. If you don't pay within 72 hours the amount they demand, then they will go in and just get rid of the private key, and then you'll never be able to decrypt them. So good backup is essential when we're trying to protect against this. You also need to know that there are some people that are actually paying these amounts, and it's pretty common once somebody successfully targeted you, for somebody to target you a second, even a third time to collect the ransoms. And the ransoms are going up. They were $300 to $400. They're going up to $4,000 or $5,000 now in some cases. But you know, this is kind of how things work. I talked you through it in the previous slide. But again, you have to pay this or the data is destroyed forever. We're hearing rumors about CPA firms. You have to pay in Bitcoin or in anonymous wire transfers. And the antivirus and anti-spam is not detecting a lot of these because the bad guys that are doing this are particularly insidious, and they're using what's called a zero-day exploit. In the world of hacking and technology, what a zero-day exploit is, this is a when we see problems, these are vulnerabilities, and they're known vulnerabilities. It's pretty common when there's a problem with some kind of program that a credible security researcher that finds the problem will contact the company that puts out the software and give them a few months to fix it before they disclose it publicly. Now, in Cryptolocker, these guys are using exploits that nobody's ever seen before. So these are problems that the software companies don't even know they have, and the first time they see it is when it's being used in malware or by bad guys. So that's how this is all working, and so that's why this has been so popular. I've included another slide, the next one, that's some known subjects for Cryptolocker messages. Notice that you have topics in here that may cause you to want to look at the message and click on the link. They're trying to make this thing irresistible. Past due invoices, U.S. Bank, important notice, incoming money transfer, ACH notification from ADP payroll. You know, these are things that you and I might look at and think were something you needed to click on, but again, we don't click on links in email, period. So that's what we have. These are some of the best known advice on CryptoWall. I put these together. I do some work with Randy Johnson's network management group out of Hutchinson, Kansas, and one of the things that NMGI does is they do outsourced tech for like 150 firms between Boston and Honolulu. And so I've talked to them about some of the issues associated with this. They also work with financial institutions and a lot of other companies. They get called in a lot of times when firms that aren't their clients are in over their head and they have to fix stuff. And so these are some of the tips you've got in here. I'm not going to read them to you, but I want you to be aware that those are some of the ways people are defending against this. And if you'll show this slide to your tech person, this is not comprehensive by any stretch of the imagination. This is what we know has helped some of the people that I've talked to, but that doesn't mean that you're still going to be vulnerable. You know, if you're never going to get absolute assurance out of any kind of technology. If you're looking for absolute assurance, you know, you need to be going to church or something like that. Okay. We have email account compromises where people will try to transfer funds. We're seeing many more of these. I show this to you because the FBI actually has a notice out right now, and I've got the link for it down at the bottom of the screen if you want to go look at it. But I've talked to 2 or 3 bankers in the last few months about these situations where somebody creates a fake wire transfer, and then they go through and they call and confirm the wire transfer, and then somebody will actually confirm it. And so in these situations, somebody unauthorized will initiate the wire transfer offshore somewhere, and then the person that's supposed to be doing due diligence to check up on it to make sure it's legitimate will then go through and they'll just authorize it blindly. So just look at this, be aware that these are some of the things you have. You may want to talk to the people that have to validate your wire transfers, that second authorization person, so that they understand that they need to personally know that whatever they're approving is a legitimate wire transfer. And if they're not sure, they should pick up the phone and put the bank on hold and then figure out whether it is or not before they approve it. So that's one of the things we're seeing quite a bit in here. So some things in here with email account compromises. If something's from unknown individuals, don't open it. Don't click, you know, and I shouldn't say in here from unauthorized, from unknown individuals, and I would just say instead, do not click links within emails from anybody. So again, I would say do not click on links. Be aware that, again, you can have small changes in addresses like different letters, things like that look like legitimate email messages. You also want to question any changes in wire transfer instructions so that you don't take the money that you would normally transmit to another bank's impressed payroll account and instead send it somewhere where you don't want it to go. Again, these are just some of the guides that they have. All right, so that's the first part of this, and again, it's gone a little bit longer, but hopefully that gets you rolling through this. Now we're next going to talk about data breaches, and I want you to see this is out of a article basically showed that hacking exposed 78% of all the records compromised in data breaches in the first half of 2014. Now we look at this and you think, oh well, this really doesn't affect me. You know, I just have a small CPA firm. I don't ever do anything wrong with this. Well, I know some of you in here do pension audits or payroll. How about this one? CPA firm loses 30,000 Social Security numbers, and actually it was a staff person that did it. The staff person had a CD with the Social Security numbers, names, birth dates, and earnings of 30,000 beneficiaries of this pension plan, and the staff member's homeowner's insurance was not required to defend them in this because they said that again, there was a policy exclusion that didn't apply to it. So I show this to you because the insurance policies, the insurance companies are getting more active in trying to write around the cyber insurance policies. I want you to know that if you don't have cyber insurance, you may need it. If you ever have some kind of claim, you should look into it. Again, it's just another kind of insurance here. What's happening is the insurance company is taking this risk and pushing it out into a new product that you need. The breaches happen at big firms, though. This is actually the 15th largest bank in the country, Regions Bank. This is, again, related to a pension plan audit. 401k audit staff overnighted the USB drive to another office. Unfortunately, they went through and put both the drive and the written decryption password in a FedEx envelope. Then when the FedEx envelope got there, the written password was in it, but the drive was not. And so because of that, even though that drive's probably gone, probably got run over by a forklift in the FedEx Super Hub or something like that, over 20,000 employees were affected, and so now they had to notify all these people. By the way, this bank is an $8.6 million client to Ernst & Young in 2014, $6.7 million in audit-related, $200,000 in tax, $1.7 million in other fees. I mention this to you because this occurred in 2012. So the good news is for the firm is that they kept this, but this could have happened to anybody. As you're thinking about these breaches, you know, the big companies are going to certainly have this. We're seeing these on the small ones as well, though. And in fact, the next slide, I got a question here. Do I see these attacks made on mostly large firms or on the small as well? It's absolutely happening in both large and small firms. We're seeing the bad guys now that are trying to get access to people's confidential data. They're starting to see that the small firms are less diligent than the big firms in some of the security things. And so, you know, the problem is you might not even know that you were the source of the problem. This is an example, by the way, of one. There are 4 CPA firms that actually had an indictment that occurred in late 2012. This guy that's now been indicted and has pled guilty stole information from 4 major CPA firms in the U.S., 1 in Connecticut, 2 in California, and the 4th one is in Pennsylvania. Now, they didn't name these firms, but this could easily have been just about anybody. So I want you to be aware that this kind of stuff goes on out here. Now, I haven't spoken with this U.S. attorney in New Jersey about this, but this is actually from a story that was in Accounting Today about a month and a half ago. We also have the IRS having some trouble. Now, in all fairness to the IRS, I know they've got huge challenges ahead of them from a technology perspective, and I don't think anybody's throwing any rocks at them for this happening because it goes around. But I show this to you because the security the IRS has is likely as good or better than anything that you may have. And so if they can have a breach in their application, you certainly can have one in yours. So I want you to know that this is out there. The other risk you've got, by the way, is that in many states, they can pursue a class action lawsuit against folks. And guess what? They've decided that they want to go in and pursue that class action item in here. Okay. So another question, is this a rider on a homeowner's policy? It might be a rider on a homeowner's policy, the cyber insurance. Most likely it's a separate policy because this is really more of a business risk. Another one here, cyber crooks work on night cleaning crew to find a computer left on, have a $1,000 fine if anybody leaves the computer on. Oh, wow, that's a bad day, Gary. Okay, so looking at this, what I'd like you to see is that this is going to cost these companies a lot of money. In 2008, you had an underground market for data flooded by 360 million stolen personal records. Now, I want you to see this because the reported client data breaches that have ever occurred in history by AccountantsWorld, CCH Wolters Kluwer, Thomson Reuters Tax and Accounting, and the Intuit Tax divisions, the divisions of these that deal with tax or deal with accounting bookkeeping are zero. Okay, so the thing I want you to see here is that, there's an article in the Journal of Accountancy this month talking about cloud accounting and saying that security is the problem with cloud accounting that everybody's worried about, and saying that, that's not the problem with cloud accounting. I'm going to tell you the problem with cloud accounting absolutely is not security, and the security is actually better than what you probably have on premises. The problem is functionality and the ability to work with other applications. There are a lot of people that have done it right, like AccountantsWorld, but there are a lot of others where you get your data in and then you have to pay to get it out in some cases. So, again, I don't want to get into ugliness here, but I want you to know that when we're looking at cloud and we're looking at these kind of breaches, I'd say your data is probably more secure in the cloud than it is on premises. But just like you can make your data insecure by doing stupid things at your office, you can also make your data insecure in the cloud by using bad passwords and other things like that. So one of the things you may need to do is to create a data breach response plan. The AICPA has one as part of the IT section. You also, if you're in public accounting, could talk to your insurance company's loss prevention department. There's an online trust alliance PDF guide, and American Bar Association has a book on this as well for small law firms that could be pretty much on point. So those are some of the things associated there, again, with data breaches. Hopefully that'll get you rolling with it. Now, our next polling question, number 3, how many breach notifications have you received in the last 2 years? I'll let you guys go through and figure this out. You'll notice that I believe that Home Depot email was actually sent to me, so I've received more than my share. I think I got Target and Home Depot, so I'm sure some of you will get those. My wife has received a couple. I keep wondering, why can't, instead of me getting 2 or 3 simultaneous identity theft protection things from all these outside services, why can't I just stack those up where they just go on and I can just have identity protection for life, for the rest of my life? I don't know. We'll see what happens here, but I show this to you here. That's what we got. I got 90% that have voted. Let me give you a few more seconds here, about another 10, 15 seconds. Yeah, it looks like, oh yeah, Kevin, good to see you again, Kevin. Hope everything's well for you. You got 1 for Target, 1 for Home Depot. Out on one of their primary cards. I'm using the 4th card in 2 years. Here's another one. I have one that I will use to monitor for the rest of my life. Yeah, and that's as you're looking at some of these things, that's a concern I think we all have to deal with, is that, again, somebody getting our data and doing things with it. The criminals are getting a lot better than they've ever been in this area, and they're actually getting better faster than the good guys are getting better at detecting things. So close this one out. Here's the responses. Interestingly enough, over 50%, 57% of you have received at least 1 breach notification in the last year. And so that's something you need to be aware of. If you think about this, if you think about the accounting profession, legal profession, if you ever had a data breach, that could be game over for your practice. And so that's something that's kind of scary that you may need to be aware of. Okay, so our next topic, selected issues associated with a cloud-based fraud investigation. I'm going to go through this one stupidly fast just because I want to get you some coverage on this, but I want to get to the next section, which is on what you can do to mitigate your risks. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. There's some law enforcement issues, jurisdictional issues. You also have issues associated with cloud providers and things in here. Forensics, you may or may not have the proper logs kept, and you may or may not get support from your cloud provider. That's something to ask about and to work through. You also may have issues with getting the prosecutors and attorneys because, frankly, the forensic investigative resources and the things that are out here are just, the need is much greater than what everybody has, than what actually exists. So because of this, everybody wants to be CSI and go test bullets and see if they're from a gun. The problem we've got, though, is that we don't have a lot of people saying, hey, I want to go out and run trace routes, and hey, I want to do reverse IP address lookups and that kind of stuff, because that's the reality of a lot of this forensic stuff. Is it's not really glamorous, but it's just a lot of hard work. Okay, so we look now at law enforcement issues. We have a lot of traditional techniques. You can have some of the ways to handle evidence may not be settled law. You may not have to help out. Jurisdiction can be an issue because where's the physical presence? Is it where the server is? Is it where the victim is? Is it where the perpetrator is? Or is it somewhere in between? And it may be all of those. So trying to figure out who to serve the subpoena on for these kinds of things is a Herculean task in many cases. We look at cloud provider issues. We have different time zones. The logs may be, some logs may be in GMT, so British time. Some logs may be in Eastern time zone, Central time zone, so forth. We may also not be able to preserve some of the data against spoliation so that we can forensically track it. So as we think about these things, I've got some things in here on cloud accounting applications. I just want you to be aware that when it comes to a lot of these things, the complexity of dealing with it, and I call this the jury duty factor, this is because you got to remember any kind of prosecution like this is going to rest on the shoulders of 12 people that couldn't get out of jury duty. And so when we start talking about server and application virtualization and hypervisors and talking about single tenant versus multi-tenant, somebody's head's going to explode before this occurs. So I want you to think about jury duty here, because you not only have to figure out what happened from a forensic perspective, you also have to go through and actually sell this to 12 people that couldn't get out of jury duty, which is awful. Now we've got some statutes in here that I'm just going to leave in here for your reference. Now, what can you do? Well, what you can do is you can use password management software. You can use unique, strong passwords on every website. You can also use a different username for more secure accounts. So if I'm B Tankersly or BFT CPA, I might have a random username like VL4ZV3 that I use for more sensitive sites, and that's my username that I select. And I don't reuse those usernames. So that way, I'm using almost my username as a second password that is not going to be known easily to the bad guys. And so by doing this now, they know neither my username nor my password. So that's 2 hurdles they have to jump over instead of 1. We also want to use 2-factor authentication wherever we can. I've got some other items through here, but I see that we're right up against time. So let's go ahead and do our last polling question, and then I'll take any questions you have. I don't want to hold you over, but I want to make sure that we gather the information we need. Okay. So the last poll's out, and we'll get this taken care of here in the next little bit. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the question window. And if not, we'll send you guys to the hacienda. Will the webcast be repeated? Div, I'm going to have to turn that one over to you. I think you guys are recording it, if I remember right.
That's right. We are recording this, and a copy of the recording will be available, I believe, in the email, the thank you email that goes out afterwards, and otherwise we'll post it up on AccountantsWorld.com.
And you all should know, by the way, that this normally would be about a 2-hour presentation, but there's enough of the stuff in here that I thought was timely that I went through a little faster than maybe I should. But hopefully you've got all the material in your handouts, and we can help you out here with it. Okay, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds, and we're going to call it done. Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. Will there be a secure link in the email? Okay, so Div, we're going to have to give them a special super secret link in here, okay? I'll give you guys a pass on this one link that you're going to get in the next 3 hours from AccountantsWorld, that you can click on that, and I think you'll be safe, okay? But other than that, we won't do it. So looking at this here, topics they're interested in, and so these are the topics that you're interested in: computer security, fraud prevention, general tech update, tax update, A&A update. So those are some of the topics that you have. Just want you all to see that, and so thank you all for participating in this. Div, Sharon, everybody, thank you all very much for participating today. It's an honor to get to do this. Again, every day I'm not in a cubicle making tick marks is a win to me. Div, with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.